Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. Neera floated in her meditation chamber aboard the Concordat vessel Thought Sovereign, her translucent blue skin pulsing with neural energy. The luminescent patterns that flowed across her body intensified as she extended her consciousness outward, practicing for her upcoming mission. As the most accomplished telepath in the Galactic Concordat's elite Mindshaper Corps, she had subjugated the will of countless beings across 12 star systems. "Operative Neera," came the thought voice of Commander Vaux through the ship's telepathic relay. "We approach the human colony. Prepare for briefing." She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as stubbornly independent, yet mentally simple. The perfect challenge to add to her flawless record. The briefing chamber hummed with psychic energy as Vaux projected images of the target. Outpost Horizon, a thriving human colony on the edge of Concordat space that had repeatedly refused diplomatic overtures. "These humans have technologies we require," Vaux explained. "Rather than destroy valuable infrastructure, the Council has authorized a Class 1 mind integration. You will infiltrate, identify leadership nodes, and reprogram them to accept Concordat authority." Neera absorbed the mission parameters directly into her consciousness. "How many controllers will accompany me?" "None," replied Vaux. "You alone will suffice." Pride swelled within her. Usually, even small colonies required at least 3 mind-shapers, working in concert. This assignment was a testament to her unparalleled abilities. "The humans suspect nothing," continued Vaux. "Your cover identity has been prepared. You will pose as a trader from the Rigelian systems. Once the colony leadership has been subsumed, signal the fleet." Neera's skin patterns flashed in acknowledgement. "And if I encounter resistance?" A wave of amusement emanated from Vaux. "From humans. Their minds are transparent, their wills fragile. The Council's studies show they cannot even detect telepathic intrusion, let alone resist it." As Neera descended to the planet's surface in her cloaked shuttle, she reviewed what was known about human psychology. Their consciousness was peculiarly individualized, unlike the naturally connected minds of most sentient species. This made them simultaneously vulnerable and unpredictable. Outpost Horizon sprawled below her, a patchwork of habitation domes and agricultural sectors carved into the rocky landscape. From orbit, she had already begun to feel the collective mental signature of the 15,000 colonists, a cacophony of isolated thoughts, desires, and emotions. She landed in an automated docking bay on the outskirts of the settlement, her shuttle's camouflage systems rendering it indistinguishable from authorized human vessels. As the airlock cycled, Neera activated her molecular reconfiguration field, shifting her appearance to human form. Olive skin, dark hair, average height. The discomfort of compressing her natural form was worth the perfect disguise. The spaceport buzzed with activity as Neera stepped into her first human crowd. The assault of unfiltered thoughts nearly overwhelmed her until she adjusted her mental barriers. Their minds called to her like unguarded terminals, each one broadcasting personal histories, secrets, and insecurities. She would begin slowly, carefully. The insertion of Concordat control routines required precision. One mind at a time, starting with transportation officials, then security personnel, then working her way to colony leadership. Neera smiled at the customs officer simultaneously, sliding into his consciousness with practiced ease. His mind yielded instantly, accepting her falsified credentials and the subtle command to forget her face as soon as she passed. "Welcome to Horizon," he said mechanically. "Enjoy your stay." Neera stepped into the colony proper, her confidence absolute. By the end of their lunar cycle, these humans would not even remember they had once been free. Neera established herself in a modest dwelling near the colony's administrative center, the perfect vantage point for her methodical conquest. Each day, she extended her influence further into Horizon's infrastructure. The portmaster now expedited her fictitious cargo without question. 3 security officers ensured she could access restricted areas. 2 communications technicians routinely overlooked her transmissions to the waiting Concordat fleet. The humans suspected nothing. Their minds yielded with such predictable ease that Neera almost felt disappointed. Where was the challenge in this mission? On her 7th day, she targeted the environmental systems supervisor, a critical node in the colony's technical hierarchy. As Neera brushed past the woman in the central plaza, she initiated the familiar mental probe, preparing to implant the standard control patterns. The woman's mind accepted her influence with the same lack of resistance Neera had come to expect. Through this new mental link, Neera extracted the access codes for the colony's life support systems and the names of the governing council members. The governor seldom leaves the central facility, thought the control technician. But Eli handles maintenance throughout the complex. He could get you inside without clearance. Eli, a simple maintenance worker with access to restricted areas, potentially useful. Neera located him that afternoon, repairing an atmospheric recycler in the market district. He worked alone, a slender man with calm movements and focused eyes. She positioned herself nearby, casually observing while extending her consciousness toward his mind, and found nothing. No, not nothing. Something she had never encountered before. Her mental probe neither penetrated nor was rejected. It simply dissipated, as if his consciousness existed in some parallel dimension her powers couldn't reach. Neera tried again, focusing her abilities more intensely. Still nothing. Not resistance. Resistance, she would have recognized. This was absence, like trying to grasp water with a net. Curiosity overcame her initial alarm. In 3 centuries of mental manipulation across dozens of species, Neera had never failed to access a mind. This human, this insignificant maintenance worker, presented an impossible anomaly. She would need to investigate directly. As Eli packed his tools, Neera approached, presenting her carefully crafted human smile. "That looks complicated," she said, gesturing toward the repaired recycler. Eli glanced up, his expression neutral. "Not really, just routine maintenance. I'm Neera, new to the colony." She extended her hand as humans did, simultaneously directing a concentrated telepathic probe at his consciousness. Eli. He shook her hand briefly. Nothing. No mental contact. Whatsoever. "Environmental systems interest me," she continued, concealing her frustration. "My last outpost had significant atmospheric issues. Horizon systems are stable," Eli replied. "Just need regular upkeep." He seemed eager to end the conversation. "Perhaps you could show me around sometime?" Neera suggested, deploying the subtle, vocal harmonics that typically enhanced her mental influence. Eli hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I suppose. I'm usually at the central maintenance hub if you have questions." As he walked away, Neera stood motionless, recalibrating her understanding of the mission. One resistant human wouldn't derail her plans, but the anomaly required investigation. If there was a weakness in her telepathic technique, she needed to identify it before attempting to control colony leadership. She contacted Vaux that night, carefully omitting any mention of the resistant human. "Integration proceeding as scheduled," she reported. "Preliminary mapping of colony hierarchy complete." "Excellent," came Vaux's distant thought. "The council grows impatient. Accelerate your timeline if possible." Neera acknowledged the order, then returned to contemplating the puzzle of Eli's impenetrable mind. She would need to get closer to him, understand what made him different. For the first time in centuries, Neera felt something beyond the cold calculation of conquest. She felt intrigued. Over the next 8 days, Neera engineered seemingly accidental encounters with Eli throughout the colony. She learned his routines, observed his interactions, and carefully cultivated a budding friendship. All the while, she continued to expand her network of controlled minds, mapping Horizon's power structures through the thoughts of its citizens. "The atmospheric regulators in Sector 5 need calibration again," Eli told her as they shared a meal in the communal dining hall. "Third time this month." Neera nodded with practiced interest while attempting yet another subtle mental probe. As always, her telepathic energy simply dissipated upon contact with his consciousness. It wasn't deflected or blocked. It was as though his mind existed on a different frequency entirely. "You're quiet today," Eli remarked, studying her face. "Just tired," she lied, still adjusting to the colony's day cycle. In truth, her frustration was mounting. She had tried every variant of telepathic technique in the Mind Shaper arsenal, from direct cognitive override to subtle emotional manipulation. Nothing penetrated Eli's mental isolation. Through conversations with his colleagues, all easily controlled, Neera had learned that Eli possessed a rare neurological condition. The humans called it atypical neural architecture, a harmless variation that occasionally appeared in their species. To Eli, it had meant a lifetime of subtle differences, difficulty with certain social cues, heightened sensory awareness, unique thought patterns. Could this variation somehow shield him from telepathic influence? The possibility contradicted everything the Concordat understood about consciousness. Neera reported her regular progress to Vaux, but continued to omit any mention of the resistant human. Her superiors would view her inability to control a single mind as failure, perhaps even recall her. The very thought provoked an unfamiliar anxiety. "You should see the sunrise from the eastern ridge," Eli told her as they finished their meal. "It's worth waking up early for." Neera agreed to meet him there the following morning, calculating that the isolated location would allow for more aggressive telepathic attempts without witnesses. The twin suns crested the horizon as they stood at the observation point, casting crimson and amber light across the rugged landscape. Eli watched in quiet appreciation while Neera gathered her mental energy for the most powerful direct assault she had ever attempted. She struck with the full force of her abilities, expecting to finally break through whatever anomaly protected his mind. The telepathic energy dispersed harmlessly just as before, but this time something unexpected happened. For a fleeting moment, Neera received a sensory impression, not Eli's thoughts, but a fragment of his perception. She felt the morning cold as he experienced it, saw the sunrise through his eyes with their slightly different color sensitivity. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Eli said, unaware of her mental intrusion attempt. Neera stepped back, disturbed by this partial connection. "Yes," she managed to say, "unlike anything I've seen." That evening, she composed a carefully worded message to Vaux. "Mission progressing. Encountering minor variations in human neural patterns. Request any additional research on human cognitive anomalies." The response came swiftly. "No known anomalies could resist properly applied techniques. If you require assistance, additional operatives can be dispatched. Timeline for completion?" Neera sent assurances that no assistance was needed. She would complete her mission within the originally allotted time frame. But as she prepared for sleep, her thoughts kept returning to that momentary connection with Eli's consciousness. Something fundamental had shifted in her understanding. This human didn't just resist control, he experienced reality differently. For the first time in her long career as a mind shaper, Neera felt something beyond professional curiosity. She felt doubt. The Concordat transport would arrive in 14 days. Neera had successfully controlled nearly 30 key personnel throughout the colony, but her obsession with Eli's immunity had become all-consuming. Each failure to penetrate his mind pushed her to more desperate measures. She stood in her dwelling, mentally reviewing everything she had learned about his condition. The neurological differences seemed minor, variations in synaptic architecture, unusual patterns of connectivity between certain brain regions, nothing that should create absolute immunity to telepathic control. Neera made her decision. She would attempt a deep invasive synchronization, a dangerous technique typically reserved for hostile species with complex mental defenses. The procedure risked damage to both subject and telepath, but she saw no alternative. That evening, she invited Healy to her dwelling under the pretense of discussing colony infrastructure. "The water reclamation system is actually our most critical component," he explained, sketching a diagram on her data tablet. "If atmospheric processing fails, we have backup systems, but if water purification goes down..." As he focused on the diagram, Neera initiated the synchronization. She gathered her mental energy into a focused point, then unleashed it not as a probe, but as a total envelopment, attempting to merge her consciousness completely with his. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Where their minds should have merged, a catastrophic feedback loop formed instead. Nira experienced flashes of Eli's life, childhood isolation, the constant sense of perceiving the world differently than those around him, the quiet pride in his technical abilities, while her own mental barriers collapsed. Eli gasped and clutched his head, the tablet clattering to the floor. What's happening?" he choked out, his eyes widening as fragments of Nira's memories flooded his consciousness. She couldn't stop the process. The synchronization had established itself, but instead of her controlling his mind, their thoughts flowed chaotically between them. Eli saw her true form, her mission, the waiting Concordat fleet, everything. When the mental storm finally subsided, they sat on opposite sides of the room, staring at each other in shock. "You're not human," Eli said quietly. "You came to control us." Nira couldn't deny it. The failed synchronization had left them partially connected. Any lie would be immediately apparent to him now. "Yes. And you can't control my mind." "No," she admitted. "I've never encountered anyone like you." Rather than the fear or anger she expected, Eli's expression showed something she recognized from her glimpse into his mind: curiosity. "My whole life, I've been different," he said slowly. "Doctors could never fully explain why I process information differently, why social interactions that seemed intuitive to others were puzzles to me." He looked directly at her. "And now an alien telepath can't read my mind." Nira felt exposed, vulnerable. The partial connection still lingered between them. Not the dominance she had intended, but something more balanced. "My superiors will arrive soon," she said. "They'll bring more like me and weapons your colony cannot withstand." "Why are you telling me this? You could still complete your mission through the others you've already controlled." Nira struggled to articulate the conflict within her. "Because I've seen your mind, not controlled it, but experienced it. Your perception is unique, different from any consciousness I've encountered." "And that matters?" Eli asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "It shouldn't," Nira admitted. "But it does." They talked through the night, the lingering connection between them facilitating understanding beyond words. Eli explained humanity's fiercely guarded mental autonomy, their belief that individual consciousness was sacred. Nira described the Concordat's view that telepathic unification was the natural evolution of all advanced species. By morning, something had fundamentally changed. The mission parameters that had seemed so clear now felt simplistic. The colony was no longer an abstract target, but 15,000 individual minds, each with its own unique perspective. "Your fleet will come regardless," Eli said as dawn broke. "What will you do?" Nira had no answer. For the first time in centuries, she questioned her purpose, and somewhere in the vastness of space, the Concordat vessel accelerated toward horizon. Nira walked through the colony's central plaza, seeing it through transformed eyes. Where once she had calculated control points and strategic assets, she now noticed the intricate social dynamics, the small kindnesses between colonists, the chaotic vibrancy of independent minds collaborating by choice rather than compulsion. "They share without being telepathic," she said to Eli, as they observed a group of children taking turns with a limited set of educational tablets. "How do they coordinate without direct mental linkage?" "Through choice," Eli replied. "Chosen. Connection is stronger than forced compliance." The partial synchronization between them had faded but left a permanent change in Nira's perception. She had experienced human consciousness from the inside, felt its intense individuality, its passionate attachment to self-determination. "In the Concordat, we believe separate consciousness is evolutionarily primitive," she explained, "that advanced species naturally progress toward collective telepathic unity. Yet here you are, questioning that belief after experiencing its alternative." Nira couldn't deny it. The diversity of thought in the colony created innovations and adaptations no unified mind would conceive. Humans solved problems not despite their mental separation, but because of it. Her communication device chimed, a message from Vorks that sent cold dread through her newly awakened conscience. Arrival accelerated. Concordat fleet approaches. Complete. Primary objectives within 48 hours. Eli read her reaction through their lingering connection. They're coming early. Neera nodded. I am expected to have colony leadership under control before they arrive. And will you? His question carried no judgment, only quiet intensity. She looked away. My entire existence has been in service to the Concordat. To fail this mission means... She couldn't finish the thought. Means becoming something new, Eli suggested. Something neither human nor Concordat. That evening, Neera received a direct telepathic communication as a Concordat scout vessel entered orbit. Commander Vaux himself had arrived ahead of the main. Fleet, your progress report lacked specificity, came his cold thought voice. I will evaluate the situation personally. Terror gripped her. Discovery of her hesitation would mean immediate psychic recalibration, the erasure of the very individuality she had begun to value. Eli found her in her dwelling, her human disguise flickering as her control wavered. My commander has arrived, she whispered. He will know everything. Then we must act now, Eli said with surprising determination. You've shown me what the Concordat plans. I've shown you what they would destroy. What do you choose? Neera's internal conflict reached its peak. Centuries of certainty warred with her new understanding. If I defy them, I become nothing, she said, her voice breaking. Neither mind-shaper nor human. I would belong nowhere. Eli took her trembling hands. Or you become the first of something new, a bridge between separate and connected consciousness. As dawn approached, Neera made her decision. She would protect what she had discovered in this colony, a kind of diversity the Concordat had never imagined valuable. She would protect Eli, whose impossible mind had changed everything. I need to remove the controls I've placed on your people, she told him, and then we must warn your leaders. They'll never believe us in time, Eli said. They will, Neera replied, her resolve hardening, because I'll show them the truth the only way I can. She would reveal herself completely, not as conqueror, but as defector. This is absurd, Governor Marlowe said, staring at Neera's now undisguised form. Her blue skin pulsed with agitation, the luminescent patterns flowing rapidly across her body. You expect us to believe you've been controlling our people's minds, and now want to help us. They stood in the colony's secure conference room, Neera having removed her molecular disguise after Eli had convinced the governor to grant them an emergency meeting. I've released those I controlled, Neera replied. They'll remember everything within hours, but we don't have hours. The Concordat fleet approaches, and advanced scouts have already arrived. The security chief lunged forward. We should detain this creature immediately. Neera could have easily taken control of everyone in the room, except Eli. Instead, she remained passive, allowing the colony's leadership to process the revelation at their own pace. She's telling the truth, Eli insisted. I've seen into her, mine just as she's tried to see into mine. The Concordat considers telepathic domination their right. They want our technology and resources. The governor's skepticism faltered as her communications officer burst into the room. Governor, we're detecting multiple unidentified craft entering orbit. They're not responding to hails. The situation crystallized for everyone present. Whatever Neera's motives, the threat was real and immediate. What do they want? The governor asked Neera directly. Your technical innovations in atmospheric manipulation and mineral extraction. Your location at this system's jump point intersection. Your population as telepathic subjects. Neera's voice remained steady. They sent me first because conquest through mental control is cleaner than military action. And now you're betraying them. Why? Neera looked at Eli. Because I encountered something I couldn't control or understand. It made me question everything. A wry smile crossed the governor's face. Humanity's greatest talent, making others question. Their assumptions. The colony's leadership wasted no more time on doubts. Emergency protocols were activated. The population began moving to sheltered positions. But conventional defenses would mean nothing against Concordat telepaths. I can shield key personnel, Neera explained as they formulated their strategy. Create mental barriers the other mind-shapers cannot penetrate, but not everyone. Focus on protecting our command structure and technical specialists, the governor ordered. We need to maintain control of essential systems. As Nira began the painstaking work of constructing psychic shields in the minds of colony leaders, she detected a familiar presence approaching the planet's surface. "Vorks comes," she said, her patterns pulsing with alarm. He sensed my betrayal. The telepathic assault began without warning. Nira felt Vorks's consciousness slam against her mental defenses, shocked by her resistance. Their minds battled in a dimension the humans couldn't perceive, waves of psychic energy distorting the air around them. "What's happening?" someone shouted. As equipment shorted out and lights flickered, Eli alone seemed to sense the conflict. He moved to Nira's side, and something extraordinary happened. Her connection to him somehow strengthened her defenses. Vorks's attack faltered against this unprecedented combination of telepathic power and immune human consciousness. But physical weapons followed. The building shook as concordant precision strikes targeted key infrastructure. In the chaos, a support beam collapsed, crushing Nira beneath it. Eli and the security team pulled her free, blue ichor seeping from her wounds. "I can't maintain the shields," she gasped, her luminescence dimming. "Not while injured." The governor looked grim. "How long until the main fleet arrives?" "Hours at most," Nira whispered. Eli hadn't released her hand since pulling her from the rubble. "There's another way," he said, eyes alight with sudden inspiration. "You couldn't control my mind because of my neurological differences. What if we could replicate that protection?" "Impossible," Nira said. "Your condition is unique. But you've mapped it through our connection. You understand the pattern now." Nira's patterns pulsed as she grasped his meaning. "A telepathic broadcast, using your neural architecture as a template. It would be unprecedented." "Would it work?" the governor demanded. "Theoretically," Nira admitted. "But it would require technology your people don't possess." "We have something better," Eli said. "We have human ingenuity and your telepathic knowledge. Together we can build a defense no one has ever imagined." As concordant forces established a perimeter around the colony center, humans and one rebel, Telepath raced against time to create something entirely new, a shield not of energy or matter, but of thought itself. "The principle is sound," Nira explained, her wounds temporarily stabilized by the colony's medical technology. She hovered over the device they had constructed, an uncomfortable merger of concordant telepathic amplifiers salvaged from her shuttle and human neurological scanning equipment. "In theory, we can broadcast Eli's neural pattern as interference." Engineer Thomas looked skeptical. "You're suggesting we can jam telepathic signals with what exactly?" "Thought static." "Not static," Eli corrected. "My brain doesn't block telepathy. It processes consciousness on a fundamentally different wavelength. Nira couldn't control my mind because she couldn't find the right frequency." The colony's fabrication teams worked feverishly as distant explosions signaled the Concordate's advancing ground forces. Technicians repurposed communication arrays while medical staff analyzed brainwave patterns never before considered significant. Nira marveled at their adaptability. Where Concordate specialists would have required perfect conditions and extensive planning, these humans improvised solutions with whatever materials lay at hand. They welded scrap metal into essential components, rewrote software on the fly, and integrated technologies never designed to work together. "Your species thrives on constraint," she observed to Eli as he modified neural scanners to interface with her telepathic technology. "The Concordate would consider this chaos, yet you're creating something unprecedented." "Necessity drives innovation," he replied. "When every mind approaches a problem differently, you get multiple solutions instead of one perfect answer." Governor Marlowe entered the workshop, her expression grim. "The main fleet has arrived, 6 capital ships and numerous support vessels. Our long-range communications have been neutralized." "We need more time," Nira said, her luminescent patterns pulsing with urgency. "The outer settlements are already reporting cases of mass disorientation," the governor continued. "Your former colleagues have begun their work." Nira closed her multifaceted eyes briefly. She knew the protocol. The most powerful mind-shapers would target population centers, while combat forces secured strategic locations. Within hours, the entire colony would fall under telepathic dominion. "The device should be ready for testing within 2 hours," Engineer Thomas announced. "We don't have 2 hours," the governor responded. Eli's calm voice cut through the growing tension. "Then we don't test it. We deploy as soon as assembly is complete." "The risks," Neera began, "are acceptable compared to certain defeat," Eli finished. "If it fails, we're no worse off." As they made final adjustments to the device, Neera explained its limitations. "This will be a desperate measure against Concordat telepathy, but their conventional weapons remain a threat, and we cannot predict how other species in their forces might react to the broadcast." The governor nodded grimly. "We've evacuated as many civilians as possible to the deep shelter complexes. Our security forces will handle conventional threats, as long as they can resist mental control." When the device was finally assembled, it looked nothing like the elegant technology of the Concordat. Raw and improvised, it integrated Eli's medical monitoring equipment with Neera's telepathic amplifiers and the colony's communication array, a physical manifestation of their unlikely alliance. Eli settled into the central chair, electrodes attached to his scalp. "How will this feel?" Neera's patterns shifted in the equivalent of a shrug. "Unknown. No telepath has ever attempted to broadcast a non-telepathic consciousness pattern." "Comforting," he said with a wry smile. Outside, the sounds of combat grew closer. Colony defense forces reported Concordat troops advancing from multiple directions, their movements unnaturally coordinated, a sign they were being telepathically directed. "They know what we're attempting," Neera warned. "Vorks will have sensed my intentions." As final preparations were completed, the governor addressed the small team. "What we do here today may determine not just the fate of our colony, but humanity's first true defense against telepathic coercion. Whatever happens, you have my gratitude." Eli reached for Neera's hand, their fingers intertwining, human and alien. "Ready?" Her patterns glowed with new intensity. "Together." The activation sequence began, power surging through makeshift connections. Eli's neural pattern was analyzed, digitized, and fed into Neera's amplifiers. She channeled her remaining telepathic energy into the system, converting his unique consciousness into a broadcast signal. The device hummed to life, emitting no sound or light perceptible to human senses. But across Horizon Colony, the advancing Concordat forces suddenly faltered. The effect rippled outward like waves in still water. Throughout the colony, Concordat ground forces stumbled mid-step, their telepathic coordination suddenly severed. In orbit, crew members on Concordat vessels clutched their heads in confusion, as the familiar mental linkage that had guided their entire lives abruptly dissolved. In the broadcast center, Eli sat rigid in the chair, eyes wide but unseeing, as his unique neural architecture was amplified across the settlement. Neera channeled the signal, her luminescence pulsating in perfect synchrony with the human equipment. "It's working," Governor Marlowe whispered, watching the tactical displays as Concordat advances halted in disarray. But something unexpected was happening. The broadcast wasn't merely blocking Concordat telepathy, it was triggering a cascade, effect throughout their hierarchical mental network. Neera felt it first, her connection to Eli giving her insight into the unfolding phenomenon. "It's not just shielding us," she gasped. "Eli's consciousness pattern, it's awakening individuality in telepathically controlled minds." Across Concordat ships and ground forces, beings who had lived their entire lives under partial mental domination were experiencing something forbidden, complete self-determination. Service species engineered for obedience, junior officers accustomed to mental guidance, even other mind-shapers, all were suddenly confronting thoughts that were entirely their own. Commander Vorks's desperate telepathic assault battered against the broadcast, his ancient mind unable to comprehend the chaos spreading through his forces. For millennia, the Concordat had used telepathic control to maintain perfect order across dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. Now that control was unraveling before a technology they had never imagined possible, the broadcast of a mind naturally immune to their power. In orbit, the first Concordat vessel broke formation, its crew no longer responding to telepathic commands. A second ship followed, then a third. "We're receiving a communication," the colony's operations officer announced in disbelief. From the Concordat command vessel, they're requesting to negotiate. Eli slumped in the chair as technicians began powering down the device. The broadcast had served its purpose. Nira moved to his side, supporting him as he regained awareness. "Did it work?" he asked weakly, his eyes gradually refocusing. "Beyond anything we imagined," Nira replied, her patterns displaying wonder and emotion she had never before expressed in her centuries of existence. "You didn't just block their telepathy. You've started a revolution." The governor approached with newfound respect in her eyes. "The Concordat fleet commander is requesting direct communication. No telepathic links, just ordinary transmission. That's unprecedented." Within the hour, an extraordinary meeting convened. Representatives from the colony sat across from Concordat officers, including Commander Vaux himself. The ancient telepath's skin patterns displayed confusion and something else Nira recognized immediately: fear. "This technology cannot be permitted," Vaux stated, his translator converting telepathic concepts into human language. "It threatens the foundations of galactic order." "It threatens control, not order," the governor replied calmly. "There's a difference." Vaux turned to Nira, his patterns expressing betrayal. "You have violated your essential nature, Mindshaper. You were created to extend Concordat consciousness." "I was shown another possibility," Nira responded, her hand finding Eli's beneath the table. "One where minds connect by choice, not compulsion." The negotiations continued for days. Throughout Concordat territory, reports arrived of similar awakenings. The broadcast had triggered a cascade effect through their telepathic network, awakening independent thought in beings who had known only partial consciousness for generations. "We cannot simply abandon our ways," Vaux finally conceded, after countless hours of debate. "But perhaps coexistence is possible." The treaty that emerged was unlike any in galactic history. Not the submission of the weak to the strong, but a genuine agreement between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. Humanity would share its technological innovations freely, while the Concordat would respect the mental sovereignty of all species. One standard year later, Nira stood with Eli at the dedication of the Horizon Institute, a center devoted to the study of consciousness and communication between telepathic and non-telepathic species. Researchers from across the galaxy gathered to explore what had once seemed an unbridgeable divide. "They're calling it the Consciousness Revolution," Eli told her, as they watched ships from 24 worlds descend toward the expanding colony. Concordat historians are rewriting their understanding of evolution. They no longer see telepathic unity as the only path forward. "They've discovered what I learned from you," Nira replied, her patterns shifting into the complex harmony that expressed contentment. "That true connection comes not from control but from understanding difference." "And now we have both," Eli said, his unique mind still a fascinating mystery to the telepaths who studied it. "Your ability to share thoughts, directly our capacity to develop completely independent perspectives." Nira's patterns brightened. In the year since the broadcast, her connection with Eli had evolved into something unprecedented. Neither the telepathic bond of her people nor the verbal communication of humans, but something entirely new. Though his mind remained resistant to control, they had learned to share experiences, emotions, and certain thoughts through a conscious mutual effort. "The Concordat philosophers are still struggling with the concept," she said, amusement rippling through her luminescence. "They cannot reconcile how a species without telepathy created such diverse civilizations without central guidance. Perhaps someday they'll understand that our greatest strength comes from our greatest challenge," Eli suggested. "Learning to connect despite our separation." Across the galaxy, the ripples of their unlikely alliance continued to spread. Telepathic species began experimenting with periods of mental independence. Non-telepathic species developed technologies to share experiences more directly. Ancient barriers between fundamentally different forms of consciousness began to dissolve. And at the center of this transformation stood an impossible pair. She who had controlled 1,000 minds until encountering the one human who had changed her forever, and he whose unique perception had unleashed a revolution no weapon could. have accomplished. What happens next? Eli asked as they watched the diverse beings gathering below them. Neera's patterns formed the complex sequence that humans had come to recognize as her smile. Something new, she answered, something neither of us could have imagined alone. Their joined hands, one luminescent blue, one human, represented not the end of a conflict, but the beginning of a possibility neither species had foreseen. Minds connecting not through dominance but through difference. And across the stars, consciousness evolved in ways the Concordat had never predicted, guided not by control, but by choice. The unexpected gift of a human mind that could not be conquered.